Okay. Uh-oh. Jeff, I'm getting feedback on this. Let me try that. Okay. We got it. All right, Ms. Cole. All right. I'm calling the July 9th, 2020 regular meeting of the Roswell City Council to order. Ms. Call, please call the roll.
Counselor Robeck.
Here.
Counselor Perry.
Here.
Counselor Best.
Here.
Counselor Sanchez.
Here.
Counselor Stubbs.
Here.
Counselor Moore. Counselor Peterson.
Here.
Counselor Foster.
Here.
Counselor Kennard. Here. Counselor Oropesa.
Here.
Mayor Kintai.
Present.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'll ask everyone to please rise while Counselor Peterson leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance and Counselor Kennard does the invocation. Counselor Peterson.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. I ask that you help us make these decisions, the local legislators, the local governments, our state government, our national government in these trying times. Every day seems to be something new, but I pray that our faith is strong in you and that we will lean on your wisdom. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Counselor Stubbs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the agenda for the July 9th, 2020 regular city council meeting to include minutes from the June 2nd council workshop, the minutes from the June 11th regular city council meeting, 2 requests for proposal, 2 Main Street Roswell agreements, 7 air center leases, and 4 resolutions.
I have a motion by Counselor Stubbs and a second by Counselor Peterson to approve the agenda as presented. Any comments or questions? Let the record reflect that at 6:02, Counselor Moore joined us. Hearing no comments or questions, I'll call for a voice vote. Please activate your vote box at the time you respond. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. And it passes 10-0. All right, first thing up is a little bit of statement by me. I really don't have much to add to what Mr. Nebb is going to present to us. So we'll move into that at this point. Mr. Nebb.
Okay, they muted me already.
Go figure.
Yeah. Mayor, City Council, our election was at a time right when COVID-19 was hitting and everything, and we did not get the chance to recognize a long-term community member that has served on the council for a long time. And so now that we've come to this stage of where it's at, we've invited Councilor Henderson in to be recognized for his service. And it's my privilege to read a little bit of his short history serving with his public service with the city. So Steve Henderson, former Roswell City Councilor, Ward 2, 1974 to 1978, 2004 to 2020. Was first elected to the Roswell City Council for the term 1974 to 78. During his term, he served as Mayor Pro Tem for 2 years with Jerry Smith mayor. Projects accomplished during Steve's term were a new Roswell Public Library, a new Roswell Industrial Airport Terminal building, and the start of the Wool Bowl softball complex. The council passed an $11 million bond issue to purchase water rights and construct needed water infrastructure funded by the increase in water rates, which was very unpopular with the citizens of Roswell. Henderson did not seek re-election due to threats over the increased water rates. In April 1990, City Manager Ralph Fresquez hired Henderson to be the Community Development Director. Over the next 14 years, his duties included property management, grant writing, and grant management, legislative capital outlay, property procurement, Keep Roswell Beautiful, Tree City USA, Main Street Roswell, Roswell Recycles, Pecos Trails Transit, facilities maintenance, vehicle maintenance, Roswell Civic and Convention Center, and the Roswell Museum and Art Center. During his 2004 to 2020 service, Henderson has served 2 terms as Mayor Pro Tem with committee assignments on finance, police, buildings and lands, and public safety. In addition, he served 8 years as treasurer and board member of the Southeastern New Mexico Economic Development District and 15 years as director at large, New Mexico Municipal League Board of Directors. Projects completed during Henderson's current term include American Eagle Air Service, Convention Center addition, new Roswell Recreation and Aquatic Center, improvements to the Roswell Air Center, improvements to Cielo Grande Recreation Area, installation of the smart meter system, upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant, improvements to the Spring River Park and Zoo, and a new software system for finance. Of all the city ordinances passed during his 20 years of service, Henderson believes that the no smoking in public places ordinance was the most beneficial. The city ordinance was passed 2 years ahead of the state law on non-smoking. Henderson's professional designations include the Certified Municipal Official designation by the Leadership Institute, New Mexico Municipal League, and the Diamond Certificate Leadership Region awarded by the National League of Cities, the National League of Cities University. Former Council Henderson has served with 5 city managers, 7 mayors, and over 100 council members, several more than once. An interesting sidelight is Henderson served with Councilor Sterling Grant in 1974 and 78. Until recently, he served with Councilor Caleb Grant, Sterling's grandson, some 41 years later. Henderson is active in other areas in the community. He is the member and past chair of the Roswell Committee, employer support of the Guard and the Reserve, president, Eastern New Mexico University Roswell Foundation, the vice president of the New Mexico Oil Corporation, member, past president, and Paul Harris Fellow of Roswell Rotary Club, and he is a certified lay minister and member of the First United Methodist Church in Roswell. He and his wife Carol, a retired educator, have been married 64 years. They have 4 grown children and 5 grandchildren. Former Councilor Henderson thanks all the citizens of Roswell and especially Ward 2 for the opportunity to serve. He plans on continuing with his volunteer work in the community. I think he's touched everything within Roswell and in a positive manner. So Mayor, I just want to introduce you to former Councilor Steve Henderson.
My favorite part of that whole thing is the serving with Sterling Grant and Caleb Grant, and to me it's just too good. I have a presentation, a plaque, and council. I would like to invite all of you to join us down front for photographs. Come on down.
Well, thank you, Joe and Mayor. I appreciate the special honor this evening, and a special thank you to my colleagues on the council. I served with all of you, and you're part of the 100 that I served with, and I think Barry and Judy are part of the group that I served more than once with. So I appreciate this special thank you, and I just want to say thanks to Joe. He read that exactly the way I wrote it, and I appreciate my years with the city council, and each of you know the difficulties that we all face as elected officials, and I want to say a special thank you to my bride of 64 years. We raised 4 kiddos in the community, and I appreciate the sincere appreciation from my colleagues here on the Roswell City Council and my colleagues on the New Mexico Municipal League Council awarded me a little bowl made by Gordy Hicks over at Socorro. So, at any way, a sincere thank you for my years of service and putting up with me, and we did some good things. We won't talk about the mistakes that we may have made, but we joy in the blessings that we received all of these years. So good luck to you as you make decisions on the current activities, difficulties that we all face with finances and the economic development that we are looking at. So thanks again, Mayor. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate your presentation, and good luck.
Thank you. I hesitate to do this, but Councilor Perry has asked to say a few.
words. I just wanted to thank you personally. When I first joined the council back in 2009, Councilor Henderson was the first person to call me the very next morning, and I went to his office, and we spent a significant amount of time. He helped me to better understand municipal government. He felt like that was the best thing to do, and I appreciate that very much. I took my first term as mayor pro tem was directly after Councilor Henderson, and he gave me a bow tie that day when that happened, and I hope that I will be able to be a counselor for Ward 2 as fine of one as you. You brought conviction to this council. Every decision you made, you had conviction about it, so I thank you for that. And also I want to thank Carol. It is hard. All of us up here who have spouses know how hard it is on a spouse for someone to serve in government. And I just want to thank Carol for allowing Roswell to have a stellar in this council for as many years as we did. God bless you both.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. I have Councilor Foster. Councilor Foster, you have the floor.
And I too want to thank Steve and Carol. And Carol knows she's my second favorite Carol in the world. And she also, of all the people in Roswell, and especially in this room right now, I've known Steve the longest. I've known him for 32 years. Half of his married life and all of my married life, because I met Steve when I was first dating my wife, and I visited their church. So I did want to appreciate all the time that I've worked with him and he and Carol in this community and all that they've done for this community. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Carol.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilor Sanchez?
I don't, or because I don't have a cinema, and it is or can city or yeah.
Thank you, Sabino. Thank you.
All right. That exhausts my list.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Nebb?
All right. The other item I have is the city manager report. I wanted to give you an update on a few things going on with the city. Just really quickly, of course, the budget went through the finance committee, and so we do have a special session set for the end of July, July
23rd.
23rd, okay. And so we will be looking at approving the budget at that point in time. That gives us that final week in order to get the budget into DFA. So I believe that, I think there were no changes coming out of Finance Committee, but I think we're right at the tail end of getting a budget done that can be approved by the state. Wanted to bring you an update with the voluntary severance program. It's kind of a good, bad thing, blessing, curse, or whatever you want to call it. We were very successful with the voluntary severance program. We had 43 individuals take us up on the offer to sever employment from the city. That has allowed us to have a little bit more room within our budget, and as we've looked at not replacing those. Probably I will share 4 of the higher level ones, because the fire chief will be retiring with us. The assistant fire chief will be retiring from us. We are working with community development in order to look at that position. We're still waiting for some information from the state, so I won't go too much into that one. And then, of course, Mark Bleth with the Air Center has chosen to go into the private sector. And so those are the majority of those ones. We've had 43 of them throughout. They will become very important to us as we kind of move positions around to balance out the workload, because again, we do need a fire chief, and so we will backfill within those positions and all that, but that's going to allow us to move. I would say that the positions that we allowed to sever employment out of the enterprise funds allow us to do internal transfers of individuals out of the general fund into that, which helps offset some of those costs within the general fund. But just wanted to share that with you on the voluntary severance program. The topic of furloughs, what I am trying to do is get the furlough conversation into the city council's hands. So this is the last conversation I hope to have before the budget gets approved. Our gross receipts tax in June was higher than we anticipated, and so what I am hoping to do, unless there's any conflict with that, is to vacate or suspend the furloughs for the month of August. So we've already suspended the ones for July because we had a very good voluntary severance group. We had more than expected that left than what we anticipated. That provided us a cushion that we could forego the furloughs in July. I would like to now forego the furloughs in August because we had a really nice GRT number for the June comparatively to what we have. And I would say that as we move into the next months, this will become more of a council decision once that budget is approved. But I would just, if there's anybody that has a difference of opinion of that, please let me know. But I would like to inform my people, the sooner the better, so that they can prepare accordingly with that. Just a couple things on COVID-19. Update on the city services. The governor today has suspended indoor dining. She's backed it up because she's worried about the numbers of what we are seeing of infected. And so so there has been some back off of the gating criteria as far as moving forward. So she has pulled it back a little ways. She did not make any other changes with any of the services that are still closed. Mass gatherings, we believe mass gatherings may stay down for another up to about 12 months in some form or fashion. And so what I wanted to talk about, it actually was ours, is that because right now we have the zoo closed, the museum closed, the library closed, and the adult center. What we are going to do in order to help move these things forward, right now we have a date set for the zoo reopening of November 20th. We're setting it out there. We're doing some cleanup. We're doing a lot of work with that, and we're hoping to have all that new work done. But we don't intend to open the zoo until about November 20th. That sets us up in order to go into the Christmas holiday season, and if we're allowed to do it at that point in time. I believe that, and we'll be talking about this tomorrow within senior staff, We will more than likely keep our other services that are currently closed down a little bit longer, and just to give us time to reset some of the model that we are trying to get to. It's going to help us prepare better for the cost recovery, because we'll have a couple more conversations with you and as we go through that. There's been a question, and I know that there's been a couple things out of the governor's office, the state, about enforcement of the health orders. We did receive a letter from the Attorney General that says we may enforce the health orders and the conditions of that. I just wanted to share with you that our police department has not ever not enforced a law, and they are willing to continue to do so. The challenge we have is that most of that criteria is a misdemeanor level, and right now, because we have tightened up their staffing and everything, it will be a priority basis as to how we respond. So it will go down the list, but we will respond. I think the chief has said that continuously. If they get a call, they respond to it. If nothing else, it's a welfare check and all of that. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. We know what our responsibilities are, and we will handle that. I know the chief was on a phone call with the state today as far as making sure that we all know how this is going to operate, and so we're comfortable with where we're at. I just wanted you to know as well too, we enforce all laws. The Attorney General says that we may enforce these health orders, so that's what we will do. We will enforce through that. The challenge will be is that it's the higher priority calls are going to get taken care of first, and we'll work our way down. So we are, I think one of the things that the chief just mentioned to me, and I know Karen had been working on that on the emergency side, we actually believe that we're more responsible on this health order side to educate our people more. So all of the police cars have been equipped with extra masks in order to hand them out and to talk to our constituents about their safety as well as everybody else's. And so we will be taking that approach as far as the contact is what's most important to us. And I don't want to take the police officer's discretion away, that they can pick and choose how they enforce that law based upon the conditions that are out there. And so that's where we'll kind of remain with what the PD has. The chief said he would be happy to share anything if you have any further questions on that. The last item up here is the verification of support items, and I don't know what to call this. Not really. But we've been talking about this. There's 2 items on the agenda tonight that I know that I've talked to individual city councilors. It's whether or not we needed to do a resolution or just some kind of guidance. But guidance from 10 city councilors is sometimes problematic because you all have different opinions as to how to get there. So what we want to introduce within the structure of our agenda is, rather than to go to the level of a written resolution that's very definitive in nature, I just need a check and balance every once in a while when we have issues. So the 2 items on tonight, of course, is the airport authority conversation, because that is requesting the city manager, directing me to work on something. The other one is the legislative assistance, the Thompson Consulting Agreement. That one, it's well underneath the amount that we have to go out for bid or RFP. It's a professional service, but I know that there could be differences of opinion on the council with that consulting agreement. I know we'll have a couple more that are coming up there. So what we want to do is try to introduce, just kind of like we have with the contracts and the agreements, is that I just need a gut check from the city council on occasion as to how we're going to handle one item when I have bookends, opinions as to how to do that, because my trouble and my struggle is that you give me a lot of autonomy to do my job, and I want to make sure that I make the best decision, but there are certain things where I need better guidance out of the full council in order to get there, and I think this might be a way that can kind of help. I'm happy to go out on that limb and make a lot of the decisions myself, but I think there are certain issues that are really need to be made by the city council as a whole. And so I think that's my hope. And so we might change the verbiage a little bit. I went through verification of support. I went through, just any kind of guidance or anything of that nature. But there are some issues that it's really hard to keep everybody's opinion on at least a comfortable side. And so that's where we'll be bringing that forward. Mayor, council, I'll stand for any questions of my report.
Any questions for Mr. Neb? Nope. Councilor Roebuck.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the one thing on the verification of support items is I think there certainly is a difference when council is the origin of that verification versus you asking for guidance. I think as you think through the process, I think that's, definitely, certainly, obviously, I think when you want guidance, obviously you have the ability, the power to put something on the agenda whenever you want. Right. And so I think that's a good thing. I just think we always need to make clear we all should need to know who's asking the question.
Yes, sir.
Is it coming from you directly, or is it coming from one of the committees or a counselor? So,
Certainly. Yes.
That's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Knapp. All right. Next up is item number 4. Councilor Stubbs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is at the recommendation of the Legal Committee as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission that I move to hold a public hearing and approve proposed ordinance 20-06, amending the zoning code relating to airport hazards and obstructions by modifying Article 4 definitions and adding a new Article 52, Section 18, airport hazard and obstructions.
I have a motion by Councilor Stubbs and a second by Councilor Perry to have a public hearing and vote on proposed ordinance 20-06. At this point, councilors, let me just let you know, we will also be hearing from staff about item 5 because they are linked together. These two proposed ordinances are joined at the proverbial hip. And just to give you some further heads up, item 22, the resolution on air center fees, is also part of this mix. But we will act on each one of these items separately. But for clarity, we will get an overall presentation. Mr. Morris.
Good evening. Proposed ordinance, oops. 20-06 is the zoning component of this. It's starting by adding 5 additional definitions to the zoning code to basically to add language that would protect operations at the air center. Starts with definitions. It would add a new section 18, which is to address airport hazards, specifically kind of a general overall category of the preparation of airport approach plans and the removal of obstructions and how that would happen. Again, to provide for safer operations out at the airport. Legal Committee heard this item on April 23rd and May 28th, recommended approval. Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended approval at the meeting on May 26th, and staff will answer any questions as you may have.
All right. Now, we want to go ahead and do the, let's do the next section there. Mr. Patterson.
Yes.
Like I say, these are all connected. It makes me nervous, Mr. Patterson. You're getting a drink of water. It's going to be that long?
It's thirsty work.
Huh.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This may be the second component, or maybe you could call it really the first component of this whole process is this proposed ordinance, which is 20-07, amending Chapter 5 of the Roswell City Code, which regulates activities at the airport. And we are asking that you consider adopting this proposed ordinance. So as I said, Chapter 5 governs operations at the airport. The structure of it is that it's quite lengthy, and much of it is technical and detailed kind of provisions that come out of FAA regulations or otherwise very substantive types of regulations. So this was originally brought in front of the Airport Advisory Commission several months ago, and they did kind of a broad look at the whole chapter, and their conclusion was that the thing could be brought way down and a lot of those technical substantive provisions taken out of the ordinance and moved into various kinds of policy documents, which would allow more flexibility going forward, and to have a much shorter, sleeker type of ordinance that is broader in, in terms of its scope. So what this is kind of a visual representation of what the Chapter 5 actually looks like right now. Even if you can't see all of those individual sections, it gives you kind of an idea. So all the gray there is reserved sections, so it's just empty. And then the blue show you where the different provisions are. So what we would propose to do is kind of take all that up, divide it into different things, and move it out. So there, it's a little bit difficult to see, but it gives you kind of an overall view. So the blue there are what's going to be left in the ordinance. Green goes into zoning, which was the ordinance that Mr. Morris was just talking about. And then, the yellow goes to regulations, the salmon goes to property management standards, and the orange to the minimum standards. So most of that's coming out of the ordinance and going into different policy documents that Mr. Stark can address with you. Once all of those come out, it looks more like this. So you can see that each of those becomes a separate category based on its subject matter. The blue there is what's left in the ordinance, and all of the rest of that goes somewhere else. And so that shows you kind of what the overall plan is supposed to be. Focusing on this proposed ordinance, what it's going to do is basically completely scrap the existing 80-something sections and replace it with 8. Most of them, of the 8, are already existing, although they're being adapted and changed. Their actual red line is in the packet if you want to see the exact changes to the verbiage. Most of it is like changing direct from manager to director and things like that. But those are the 8 sections that are now going to make up Chapter 5 if you adopt this ordinance. So to sum it up, Chapter 5 right now, it's a big dinosaur, and we want to turn it into a cheetah, and we're going to bring it way down, and we're going to move everything out to where it should go. And once it goes into policy, we're going to be able to adapt those policies more quickly when FAA changes its standards, or when new technologies come about, or just circumstances change. So this was recommended by the legal committee at the April meeting, 3-0, and I stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Mr. Stark, did you want to throw in a few words at this point? Because this was started...
Sure. Might head off a couple of questions. The other pieces that I've been working on are the airport minimum standards and the general rules and regulations, and as you'll see later, the master fee list. And those things will all get city council review and get approval as they come through. Right now, we're working on the minimum standards in the Airport Advisory Commission, and the meeting this month, we'll be working on the general rules, but we should be finishing up minimum standards this month.
Okay. Now, both of those two, though, are policy documents and fall under the purview of Mr. Nebb. The council won't have to approve those. Is that? Okay. I want to make sure the council understood all that. So this is a very complex process, council. We stand for any questions, but before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, if you're online or if you're in the other room, this is a public hearing. So even if you did not sign up either online or in person to speak on this matter, you may do so. I will ask if there's anyone in the other room wishing to speak on either of these proposed ordinances to please come into this room. If there's anybody here in this room wishing to speak on these proposed ordinances, is there anyone currently in the room wishing to speak on this ordinance, either of these proposed ordinances? Let the record reflect no one chose to speak on either of these proposed ordinances. While we're waiting, I will ask if there's anyone online wishing to speak on these proposed ordinances. Do we have anyone responding online? Let the record reflect no one is responding online, and let the record reflect we have had no one enter the room requesting to speak on either of these proposed ordinances. At this point, I will go to the council. Councilors, if you have questions or comments, we will take action independently, but since these are interconnected, I think any question on any of this is appropriate. Councilors? All right. Seeing no request to speak on either of these, we will do a roll call vote on item number 4, proposed ordinance 20-06, airport hazards and obstructions. A yes or aye approves the proposed ordinance. A no or nay rejects it. Ms. Call, please call the roll. Councilors, activate when she calls your name.
Counselor Roebuck?
Yes.
Counselor Perry?
Yes.
Counselor Best?
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez?
Yes.
Counselor Stubbs?
Yes.
Counselor Moore? Yes. Counselor Peterson?
Yes.
Counselor Foster?
Yes.
Counselor Kennard?
Yes.
Counselor Oropesa?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we have a 10-0 vote. Now we will go on to proposed ordinance 20-07. Even though I've previously asked if anyone wishes to speak on this, I will repeat the question. Is there anyone wishing to speak on proposed ordinance 20-07, which deals with Chapter 5 of the City Code?
Mr. Mayor, we need a motion and a second.
You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
I wanted to make sure you guys were paying attention, and you did pass very well. Thank you. Counselor Stubbs,
I want you to know I even pushed my make motion button.
I am pleased and
Thank you,
thrilled.
sir. Thank you, sir. In lieu of that, this is at the recommendation of the Legal Committee. I move to hold a public hearing and approve ordinance 20-07, amending Chapter 5 of the Roswell City Code relating to aviation.
I have a motion by Counselor Stubbs and a second by Counselor Perry to approve proposed ordinance 20-07. As I started to say, this is a public hearing, and if there's anyone now wishing to speak on this matter in this room, in the other room, or online, you may do so even if you've not signed up. Do we have anyone in the room wishing to speak on this matter? Let the record reflect no one chose to come forward and speak on this matter. Is there anyone in the other room? Is there anyone online? There is. Let the record reflect that no one online nor in the other room, overflow room, chose to come forward and speak on proposed ordinance 20-07. Counselors, it's up to you. Any questions or comment on 20-07? I see no one asking to speak on this one. We will have a roll call vote. A yes or aye approves proposed ordinance 20-07. A no or nay rejects it. Ms. Call, please call the roll.
Counselor Roebuck?
Yes.
Counselor Perry?
Aye.
Counselor Best?
Yes.
Counselor Sanchez?
Aye.
Counselor Stubbs?
Yes?
Counselor Moore? Yes. Counselor Peterson?
Yes.
Counselor Foster?
Yes.
Counselor Kennard?
Yes.
Counselor Oropesa?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, items 6 through 21 were on the consent agenda and were approved when the agenda was approved. So we move immediately to item number 22. Counselor Perry.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve Resolution 20-42, a resolution adopting new rates and fees for the Roswell Air Center.
I have a motion by Counselor Perry and a second by Counselor Kennard to approve proposed Resolution 20-42. And as I alluded to earlier, this is connected to the other two ordinances we just acted. Mr. Stark, you want to explain further?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this resolution updates the fees, and the need for that is basically one of time. Much of the fees have not been updated for decades. The fuel flow fees were contained in city code that we just voted on, and they were updated in 1984. Landing and parking fees have not been adjusted since resolution in July of 2010. So this goes and modernizes, it kind of catches up with the other airports. We did a lot of research to get to this point. One of the things that we're adding that you'll see that's new in this resolution is a airport rescue and firefighting fee. And what we're doing there is to put the cost of apparatus maintenance onto the airline, who are the ones that require that service. So that right now it gets paid for either out of the normal airport budget or out of the fire department budget. So we're trying to pass that fee through. The other things that this resolution will do is to capture security badge fees and other fees that are not currently captured in a resolution or any other document. As I said, we looked at several airports, canvassed their prices to determine reasonability. We're required to do that by the FAA. I believe the city clerk handed out a spreadsheet to you guys that is in front of you. And without going too deep into the weeds, that contains most of what we did in canvassing. The airports up on the board are most of the ones that we looked at to get our numbers. We have got this to go into effect on January 1st to give our tenants time to adjust and to expect this. So with that, I'll stop and ask you what your questions are.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. I have Councilor Foster. Councilor Foster, you have the floor.
My question comes to the ARF actual fee. Is that added to every landing or just to the commercial airlines?
Only to the airlines.
Okay, that was it then. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll ask for a voice vote, as this is a resolution. A yes or aye approves Resolution 20-42. A no or nay rejects it. Please activate your vote box when you vote. All those in favor of Resolution 20-42 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. And we have 10-0. Thank you. Next up, item number 23. Councilor Stubbs.
Jeff, this works. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is at the recommendation of the Legal Committee and the RIAC Task Force. I move to approve Resolution 20-41, a resolution to evaluate and develop a framework to consider establishment of an airport authority.
All right, I have a motion by Councilor Stubbs and a second by Councilor Peterson to approve Resolution 20-41. Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Okay, this one, this resolution, if you'll take a look at it, there's a big whereas section with lots and lots of history and background of how we got here. I think many of you are personally familiar with all of that, so I won't go in painstaking detail through each step, but you're welcome to peruse that. The upshot is that because of all of the research and work that was done by others, including the task force, we ended up with the legislature passing last year the Regional Air Center Special Economic District Act. And you can see there on the slide where it's codified in the New Mexico statutes, annotated. Basically what this act does is it allows for the creation of special economic districts at airports, and that special economic district would then be governed by an independent airport authority. And that airport authority would be created in conjunction between the city and the county. So just to give you a flavor, this is a non-exclusive list of some of the powers representative of the kinds of things that an airport authority would be able to do. the upshot is that it would take control of all of the property and assets of the airport and manage it. They would be able to enter into contracts, borrow money, issue bonds, acquire and dispose of real estate, develop its own policies and procedures. And so, again, this is all set out. All the powers that this entity would have are in statute, and you can go look them up, but this gives you kind of a taste of what this thing would be able to do. Once you get past the voluminous whereases, the actual meat of this thing are the two clauses right at the end. And basically what they do is they direct the city manager to work with the county manager and some citizens that they select to develop a proposed framework for establishing an airport authority of the type described in the act here at the RAC. And then the idea is that they would develop some deliverables, including some proposed language for the city code that would establish this thing, and also some proposed governing procedures or articles or whatever you want to call them about how this thing would be structured and operate. And that the city manager would then present the conclusions, including these proposed documents, to the legal committee at the February 2021 meeting. This was recommended by the legal committee at the June meeting, 4-0. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Peterson. Councilors, we have some individuals that have signed up to speak on this. At this time, we'll go to those. Ladies and gentlemen, I have two here in the audience, Mr. Tim Jennings and Mr. Bud Kunkel. I have one individual online, Mr. Kyle Armstrong. I'll go with those present first. Mr. Jennings, if you come forward. Mr. Kunkel, if you'll go ahead and head over there where you're right behind Mr. Jennings. Please state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Excuse me. My name is Timothy Jennings, 3968 Cottonwood Lane, Roswell, and my office is at 111 South Kentucky. Mr. Chairman, I would hope that you all would help us pass this. This, I think, will help us, allow us to move forward on developing more and more jobs at our air center. One of the biggest problems that you have there, and with some of the successes we've had recently, when you ask an individual if all the infrastructure is there, if the water, sewer, power, internet, gas, and electricity is there, when we asked an individual how long would it take to build a big hangar there, he said, I can be in and operational in 9 months. And that's the problem with developing the backside, the east side, and the south side of that air base. It's because it takes so long for the infrastructure to get in. A company won't invest that 4 or 5 years in to get that done. And that's the purpose of the plans and the thoughts that we had for those of us who are working on an airport authority task force, was to get the infrastructure in so we can add not just 50 jobs a month, but we could have 7 or 8 businesses adding 50 or 100 jobs a year into that facility, into the air base. It's such a wonderful facility, and it really will, I think it will move us like in Louisiana and those other places that had old air bases. That will allow us to develop our air base and bring us some other jobs to Roswell that are different from agriculture or oil and gas. I mean, it's going to allow us to diversify our economy and employ more of our own children. It works fantastic with our university there in the college. I think it all works good with our airframe mechanics training program. And so I'd be glad to stand for questions and at any time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Kunkel. Go ahead and state your name and your address.
Bud Kunkel, 6 Mercedes Court. We're here this evening to make decisions that will begin to impact the lives of many citizens, especially many of our young citizens. Councilwoman Kennard stated in her invocation the importance of our God in making decisions. Please consider her request when you deliberate. Former Councilor Steve Henderson also stated the importance of making sound decisions. On behalf of the citizens of Roswell, even if those decisions are not popular. Why are we here besides just to make good decisions? Well, this resolution is the culmination of a significant amount of work by the Roswell business community. The Roswell business community has consistently and strongly supported the opportunity to consider the possible development of an airport authority. This resolution will hopefully begin the process to develop a working group of business people to thoroughly investigate the option of developing an airport authority. The Roswell-Chaves County economy, as Mr. Jennings has previously stated, has primarily been based on agriculture, ranching, more recently on the dairy industry, even the pecan industry, mostly since the 1880s. Oil and gas has become a part of that, as has tourism as an industry, primarily due to the UFO phenomenon. However, since 1957, that's 53 years, the Roswell Air Center has been a part of our economy, but not a significant part of our economy. Jobs, especially for young citizens, local high schoolers in Roswell, Dexter, Hagerman, Lake Arthur. This is going to be their first opportunity.
Mr. Kunkel, 3 minutes are expired. I'm sorry, sir. Next up is Mr. Kyle Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you will please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Kyle Armstrong, 1412 Circle Diamond, Roswell, New Mexico. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, thank you for your consideration of this resolution. I'm in agreement with everything that Mr. Kunkel and Mr. Jennings had already stated, and I don't want to waste time with reiterating that. One other point I would like to make is, as a member of the task force, I had the opportunity to travel to Louisiana and Texas and to review some of these authorities that are already existing and to hear from how they managed to make them work. And what I consistently heard was two things. The structure is obviously critical, and that's how we've come to this point, but also the community is so critical and so important to making this work. The authorities that were the most successful were the ones that really engaged not just the city or the county or the government apparatus, but the people within the community as well. So this resolution, I think, is an opportunity not just to consider the mechanics of how an authority might be created, but to start bringing in new voices and expertise. There's been a number of us on the task force that have been looking at this for some time, and I think we would all certainly benefit from having some additional voices that are engaged. In speaking with people here in Roswell, across the board, I think everyone wants to see the potential of the Air Center be maximized. And again, this resolution, it's a necessary step to be able to create a roadmap and to figure out the mechanics, but it's also an opportunity to make it a responsibility of the entire community, our universities, the city of Roswell, the county of Chaves, all the different institutions, the business leaders that want to see this be successful really need to start coming to the table now before the authority ever gets formed, if that is the will of the council. So again, I appreciate your consideration of this resolution, and I am fully in support of it.
All right, thank you, sir. I have Councilor Roebuck and Councilor Oropesa. Councilor Roebuck, I understand you have a presentation.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Before my presentation, I would yield the floor to Mr. Kunkel if he had any further remarks he wanted to finish.
Thank you, Councilor Roebuck. I appreciate your courtesy. In addition to our young people and the jobs that we feel, we're convinced, the business community is absolutely convinced that this will benefit the economy of Roswell and Chaves County and southeastern New Mexico. That air center is a huge benefit to the entire area, not just Roswell. So I encourage each of you in your thoughts and your deliberations to think of the opportunity that we have been presented and take that opportunity to heart for the young people of the area. Most of you may not be aware, but an aircraft mechanic can generate anywhere between 50, 65, maybe even more per hour. Think of what that will do for our restaurants, for our housing industry, for the apartments that they're going to need. We've got a perfect storm to bring all this into fruition. So please consider that in your deliberations. Thank you, Councilor Roebuck.
You still have the floor, Counselor.
Thank you. And I put together a presentation based on some of the research and conversation I've had, and I think for the ease of communication, I'm going to come down there and present.
Okay.
But I'm not yielding my chair. I'm just moving.
I understand. All right.
I think my main goal right now is to try to piss everybody off, so I'm going to do my best. But first of all, this has been something that I've been thinking about, working about, talking about. I appreciate the time that Mr. Kunkel and Kyle Armstrong and the EDC folks and the airport folks and Juan has made to go through documents, to answer questions, and really dive into this, because as Mr. Kunkel said, it is important for us to deliberate this, so I'm gonna jump into this, and again, I did the slides mostly because to help everybody kind of follow my thought process, and also to keep me on task so we don't go too long. So this is, as I understand, why we're looking for an airport authority. The RAC has had lackluster growth under city management throughout its 50-year history. The RAC is subject to the whims of a changing city council. It's subject to the politics of a city government. I've heard the argument made that businesses struggle to work with city government, specifically that there's a certain level of uncertainty when working with the city government. And I've also heard the argument that an airport authority will have access to funds that the city doesn't have access to. These are the arguments that have been brought to me. Now, I have approached, again, different people and said, hey, multiple times over the past year, I've approached everybody who's been involved in this discussion and said, if you have any other information that we need to be considering, I want to have that over and over again. So this is the information that I've gathered. So what has been done in response by the city so far, in response to when the legislation passed? And again, I'm coming into this conversation about when that passed. It's about when I got onto city council, a little before then. But first of all, the city manager commissioned a report to analyze the legal and logistical hurdles in turning the airport over to an authority. This was in my mind, it was a very well done report. The city auditor Juan Fuentes, is the first thing he did when he was here, I believe. with the help of airport staff, engineering, planning, the city attorney, Armstrong Consultants, presented a report of facts sometime in June 2019 to the council. We looked at that fast. We discussed it. I read that report thoroughly. In addition, I also looked at the legislation as well. At that time, based on the findings of the report, there seemed to be no desire from anybody on the council, based on what our discussions we were having at the time, to move forward with establishing authority. And I'll let Joe speak for himself, but I believe that at that time, none of the councilors approached Joe and said, hey, I want you to move forward with this. So we didn't take formal action on it, certainly. We didn't bring it to this level. But I don't want anybody to think that we did not consider that we did not take time and we didn't and deliberate on it, because we did. We did look at that information, and we discussed it, and we talked about it, and said, as there was a lot of work that went into creating that legislation, and also as I wanted to say, okay, well, what's the other side? Is there more to this? What else is out there? Because there's certainly people who I think are smart, people who have the city's best interest in mind, who are fighting for this. What is that other side of the story? So I encourage the city manager, and I encourage the mayor to call a special session to give the matter, specifically the authority as it was established in this legislation, to give it sort of what I call its day in court. Because if there's an additional information, and then give everybody, say, let's have a month, and then give everybody a chance to bring forward whatever arguments they have, so we can make them. We can really bring this to the table for various reasons, and you'll have to take it up with those folks. And of course, I encourage it. I didn't request it, and I want to be very clear about that. I never sent an email that said, hey, Joe, please do this. I'm requesting, but I did encourage it in conversations with that. And so, but for various reasons, and you'll have to discuss it with Joe and the mayor, we didn't get to that point. But that to me was something that I thought was we needed to do for this. So why, in my opinion, after reviewing the Fuentes report, did the council not move forward? Now, I'm giving my opinion based on the discussions I have. Obviously, most of these councilors they'll have their own opinions, and that's fine. But this is my opinion of the feel of the room. If I were reading the room at the time, this is what I say that we were really running up against. Number one was, I think, the cost and time associated with what I call birthing a new government. Transferring something from an existing government to another existing government is a big challenge. Building a government from scratch is a lot of work, and the city only has so much what I call brain power, processing power, and there was certainly a concern that we discussed about, does the city have the manpower to actually do this? The time and the cost and time of transferring the titles to that government, gaining approval from state agencies is obviously a big hurdle, although not as nearly as big of hurdles, I think, with the EPA and the FAA, gaining their approval. And there were certain things that we felt like, wow, this is going to be very, very difficult to do. It's going to take a long time to do this. It's going to take a lot of manpower from city officials. We've been trying to clean up the OMA stuff with the FAA, and I think we've been working on that for over a year now, and that's just the OMA out there. That's not all the complexities of an actual working airport. And then ultimately, I think the last thing, at least for me personally, was it was very hard to make that jump, as I understood the authority at that time, to make that jump of not comfortable with financial support without direct control over that budget. That was a very, very hard leap for me to make, and it was a point where I'm like, I don't see where we're going to get to the point where we're going to do all this work, and at the end of the day, when we vote for it, it's going to be really hard for me to vote to sort of to sign that check over to them and not be able to control that money. That's going to be difficult. This is it. In my estimation, the process would take, if we decide to do it, it will take years and literally millions of the city's resources. And not even as much as even if we ended up spending $1 million to do this, that's not as much as that when we take the city manager and we take all these people and we pull them off everything else the city is doing, the amount of energy it's going to take to create this, in my estimation, it's huge. And so that, to me, is like, there's got to be something else there. We can't push forward with this. It seemed unachievable or unattainable. And what is our ROI? And I think that was the next question that came up in my mind. It's like, okay, let's just assume that we are able, let's say we do this, we commit to this, and we pull this off. What are we going to get for the time, energy, and money that we put into this. Now, there's certainly some speculation on this, but the challenge is that we don't really have hard details and facts, and it's hard to make a huge commitment like this if you don't have that detailed out. You know, the current structure, we've got city council, you got the legal committee, who prepares action, with the finance committee, not to the same extent, but certainly we're involved in the budgeting side of that. We have the city manager who is providing that logistical support, and the political management, which there's a ton of with the airport, and the high altitude leadership. And then we have an airport director who Mr. Starker does a great job of running that airport day to day and keeping that thing moving. So that's our current structure. In my mind, authority structure was not supposed to be big like that. They were the same size, but in my mind, the authority structure might look something like this based on my analysis of the legislation, where you're going to have a city council and a county commission. They're still going to have control over the purse strings, at least for some years, because at this point the airport's not close to being self-sustaining. So you have that structure. You have the two governments that, and then at some level, of course, the legislation doesn't specify, but at some level, those two committees will theoretically then be also doing the appointments as well. So they'll be involved in that process as well as the budget process. And then of course, then you have the airport authority and the manager and the staff like that. But a big argument for this was we're trying to free this from political influence. And I just don't see how, as it's spelled out, how that frees us from political influence. And the other thing, again, that is where I worry that we're going to stumble at the finish line, is that both structures require funding from the city. And I feel like I don't want to work so hard to get that finish line only for that to be the stumbling block. So some of these things, again, these are the arguments that people have made about the airport authority. And I do want to speak to, I think, a little bit, defend the leadership that the city has been providing for the airport, the current leadership. Our IC has had lackluster growth under city management, and traditionally I think that's true. I think the current city management is probably doing a better job than we've ever done with that, with Joe's help and leadership, and certainly with partnership with EDC. EDC is, over the previous director and the current director, have been working very, very diligently. We've got some actual real projects done out there, and we've got some other things I know in the docket that are exciting. And so I think that we're doing better than we have before. And I mentioned earlier that the RIC will still be subject to the whims of a changing council. And this is a problem that I have even with that argument a little bit, is that the city council is subject to the will of the people. It's the way we express the will of the people. And as a city councilor, I guess, I believe in that process. If people don't like me, then they need to fire me. And I'm fine with that. But we do, it is our job to understand the will of the people, our business people, as well as everybody else included. Businesses struggle to work with city government. I do understand that argument to a big extent. I've had to work with government, and it's a pain in the butt. But the reality is, at the airport, all our hangars are full, and is, to the best of my understanding, they've been full ever since Scott got here. And as best as we can tell, they've been full for at least 25 years. So the resources that we have out there have been being utilized. It's not like that they're empty. It's not like people have not been able to work with it. And we have, and continue to negotiate land leases with businesses. So yes, it's hard to work with businesses, but I don't think that's been a roadblock for anything recently that I've seen. And then this other one that I've heard a lot, and I've asked people, show me what this means, explain to me what this means. Maybe I still don't know this, but the airport authority will have access to funds that cities can have access to. And I talked about this with Joe, who's got a background in development and has a strong understanding of these. And Joe expressed to me, and I don't want to speak for him, but Joe expressed to me that we pretty much, the things he knows that people are talking about, we have the exact access to the same funds as the authority. So we have all these things, that the reasons why we were trying to establish the authority, but then what's the return on the investment? We spend 5 years, we spend tons and tons of resources, whether it's $1 million, whatever it is, it's going to take a lot of money, time, and then what are we going to get at the end of the day? And it's just, I don't see the authority. And in some ways, I feel like do we need an authority it's the wrong question. It's not that the authority might not be a solution. because I think it has a lot of merit, and I do like the idea. And I hope at some point we do figure out a way to get something an authority like done, because we need it. It will help us move forward. But the first question that we really need to be asking is, what do we want the airport to be? In some ways, we have the cart before the horse, and I think this fundamentally is the part where we're going to struggle. And even if we get an authority, this question has to be answered. But we need to find out what we want the airport to be. Then we can determine exactly how to fashion that authority to meet that objective or that goal. These are my opinions. Things that we should do first to help us answer the question, do we need authority, or what kind of authority do we need? Number one, establish a mission, vision, and values statement. And I say as requested by the staff. The airport staff presented at, I can't remember which one, but one of the airport commissions, they presented a request to have an outside consultant come in and help navigate all the different interests and create a mission, vision, value statement. And it got a lot of resistance. It didn't get any traction. I was really disappointed in that, because I think that's a properly used mission, vision, and value statement helps guide a group of diverse ideas and people. And we have a very, very diverse group of stakeholders at the airport, and that will help us almost more than anything. Untangle the airport from the city as far as like the water issues and things like that. Get the airport running budget-wise as independently as possible. Number three, I think, is super, super important. And that we need things that we need to do first before we really can answer this question of authorities. We need to establish partnerships and trust between the city council and the county commission. This is something where I know that there's a lot of politics in this town. There's a lot of stuff. I didn't get on city council for politics. I got on city council to get things done. And to get things done, you have to build coalitions of people. You have to build guiding coalitions. And I believe that the county, as well as the EDC, have something very important to offer to the future of the airport. And the airport will be much better in the future if they are strategic partners. And I think we'll be working towards, which my next point is, providing a seat at the table, a meaningful seat at the table for the county and the EDC. The city needs to be inviting them into the discussion. And lastly, the thing is, I think that I think that there's something that we can do previous to jumping full board into an airport authority if we do ultimately decide that's the best place to go. And that is, let's build a mini authority under the city. This is an idea I have. I think this is one idea. There could be many ideas out there. And I'll talk about why I'm bringing it up in just a minute. But a mini authority, objectives for success. We need to help provide direct leadership to the RAC to significantly increase its economic impact on Southeast New Mexico region. One problem we have is as great of a leader as Joe is. Joe has 40 departments. Joe could spend all his time on the airport, and there still would be more work that we would need done on that. So we need that. I think that in some ways is probably our biggest challenge right now is providing that political leadership, that 30 to 40,000, 50,000 feet leadership there, to make the RAC more business friendly. I don't want to discount the fact that working with the city is tough, and an authority would be easier for businesses to work with, and I think we need to continue to trend in that direction. And this is the other part. We need to provide that meaningful seat that I talked about with our partners, but we also, for the council, it's our job to protect the investment of our citizens. That's our responsibility. And so as we go into something, we deliberate on something, we're going to be very, very, very gun shy to take huge risks unless we feel confident that the investment of our citizens is protected. So I talked about leadership. I think it starts with what I call an airport CEO, executive director, whatever you want to call it. Getting the partners involved. You want that CEO to be trusted by the county and the EDC. You want to start building that trust, and so you have those people involved in selecting that. An at-will employee answers to the city council, because again, the airport is a city asset, and it's our job to protect it. Chaves County could put some skin in the game and pay for half of that. Can pay for half of that salary. If we can be friends with them, maybe they will. And then we want to give that CEO tools to succeed. We want to give them a clear mission, or she, a clear mission, vision, and values. We want to give them the power to enter into contracts on the behalf of the city, as broad as we can make those within legal standards. We want to give them the ability to put items onto the city council agenda, to bypass the committees, to make that process faster, and give them direct control of RAC staff and resources, working side by side with the city manager next to him versus under him. Lastly, stakeholders need direct, regular communication. A big problem that we have right now is that our stakeholders are just not talking to each other. The county and EDC and the city councilors, you know, I reached out to EDC and said, hey, let's meet, and finally they met with me, and I sure appreciate them making time to do that. But I don't think that the county has reached out to us to talk about this. They certainly haven't reached out to me. You know, I haven't reached out to them. But we have to create this regular communication. And so, in order to facilitate the regular communication, to create an advisory board. The advisory board is not to necessarily supervise the CEO, but to be a sounding place for ideas, plans, and visions, and to coordinate resources and support. If you have somebody from the county, if you have somebody from the EDC, and they're there in the idea phase, then they have ownership in that process, then they're going to be more likely to say, hey, let's bring some resources to this, because I helped come up with this idea. Just the human nature. Provide feedback, not oversight. And so I think if you look at the different types of structures, in some ways, this simplifies the structure a lot. Now, it doesn't do what ultimately we want the authority to be able to do, which is to be free from the politics of the city necessarily. But I think it's a good first step. And as you can see, it's just a lot simpler structure. Now, considering the matter, I present that idea not because it's the best idea, it's just an idea, but I think the problem that I have with resolution, one of the problems I have with the current resolution right now, and I hope that we can amend it and get it changed, something I can vote for, is that it is, as the city attorney stated, it is specifically written in order to pursue the specific authority as outlined in the legislation, and I think that to jump into that. I think we're just not ready for that yet. We don't have enough information, and I don't want to go through all that work and commit the staff time to do that when I feel like that. And again, I'm happy to look at more information, but based on the information that's been available and all the discussions I've had, and